Hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying All About That Place 2024. My name's Mark Bayley, and in today's talk, Mapping Your Ancestors, I'll be showing you a few map collections and map-based tools that can help you find out more about your ancestors' lives. Now let's start with a record collection that can help you learn more about your ancestors from London. Now Charles Booth was an industrialist and later on a social reformer, and in 1886 he began researching the poverty of London. It took him 15 years to collate his research, and that research is compiled over 17 volumes, including a large number of maps, which we'll get to in a second. But through his research, he found that over 35% of the East End of London was in abject poverty. And that's what really started the ball rolling with looking towards getting a welfare state and helping those people that couldn't survive on the income they had. So, like I say, his research was compiled into volumes of books with a huge amount of detail in, but also what's really good for us genealogists is the maps that were produced from that research. Because they are ordnance surveys, street level maps that Charles Booth had hand annotated in different colours or hand painted in different colours to show the different areas of society. From the sort of yellow areas showing the high up wealthy aristocracy classes, as you can see here with Buckingham Palace, down through the colours from red to blue to black, showing what he called the lowest class and semi-criminal. So you can see just a few blocks away from where Buckingham Palace is Chadwick Street, which was coloured in black to indicate the lowest semi-criminal class, which is now the home of Channel 4 and multi-million pound buildings are on that street. So it shows you how things have changed over time. Now what I'd like to do is go through a series of different record collections focusing on a single place. And I've chosen Chessington in this particular example. So we can go right back to the year 1086 with the original Doomsday Records. And you can see here, we've got a pin showing Chessington on the map. Now, obviously the original Doomsday was commissioned by William the Conqueror in 1085, and it records the lands, valuations, taxes, and all the lords for 1086 and also 1066. So if we click on that pin and bring up the records for Chessington, you can see that there was 3 villages. A villager was defined as a landowner owning 30 acres or more of land. There was 1 smallholder, and that was defined as a person owning 5 acres or more of land, and 2 ploughlands. So Chessington covered the area of 2 ploughlands, which is equivalent to roughly 240 acres. And you can find all these kind of details in these Doomsday Records. We've transcribed it so you don't have to view the original image, but that's also available for you to look at too. So sticking with Chessington, we'll move on in time to 1836 with our Tithe Records. Now tithes had been going on for centuries, and it was sort of deemed a official compulsory order to give a 10% of your produce in the year 794 by King Offa of Mercia. And like I say, they've been going ever since really. And in 1836, the government decided to move away from a payment in kind where you would literally give a tenth of your produce, whether it's crops, the wool from your sheep or cattle, because they're all grazing off the land, so taking nourishment from the land, and therefore you would be deemed to owe 10% of that tithing to the local church. So, like I say, in 1836, the government introduced a new payment system where you give a monetary payment of tithe rent rather than a payment in kind. It became much easier to manage, but it meant that the government had to do a nationwide survey to find out who owned what areas of land, how much land they owned, who was occupying those parcels of land, and what those parcels of land were being used for, whether it was for arable or pasture, for example, and then to deem a tithe rent value upon that land. And that's great for us genealogists because it means it's a pre-census nationwide survey covering many householders. So even if your ancestor was a tenant farmer and they didn't own any land themselves, but they rented a bit of land to farm, they would still be included in this survey because it covered the landowners, but also the occupiers. And these records can be updated up until 1936 when all tithe rents were abolished. So going back to our Chessington example, we'll bring up the apportionment books for Chessington And I just want to concentrate on this particular plot, plot 199, which is listed as Burnt Stubbs Farm. You can see here it says there's a house, buildings, lawn, a yard, and it takes up the area of 2 acres, 1 rod and 27 perches. It's owned by a Henry Goss Esquire, and it's currently occupied by James Whitehead Perry Esquire. Now that plot number, plot 199, is quite important. We'll have a look at that. And you can see all of these parcels of land listed are owned and occupied by those same 2 people, and together they take up 202 acres, and the tithe rent on that to pay was £43.19, or roughly £2,500 in today's money. So we'll jump onto plot 199, and you can see here we have the whole map of Chessington, and if you zoom in you can see the pin indicating plot 199, and it even has there the label of Burnt Stubbs Farm. Now Burnt Stubbs was originally, before it was known as Burnt Stubbs, Chessington Lodge, and it became a mansion. It was built in, they believe, 1348. It later became a Cavalier stronghold during the Civil War in the 1600s. But unfortunately, it was burnt to the ground by Cromwell's forces. And when it was rebuilt, it was later named Burnt Stubbs to signify the fact that it was burnt to the ground during the Civil War. So we can then move forward in time from the Tithe Records of 1836 to 1910. We have a Lloyd George Doomsday that will give you more details for this particular period. So David Lloyd George, the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, was tasked to raise extra revenue for the government. And to do that, he introduced, or planned to introduce, a new tax based on the increase in value of your property over time due to government spending. For example, if spending on new infrastructure, making of new roads, etc. And the idea was they would charge you a tax on that increase in value of your property due to their investment in that local infrastructure. So you would be taxed at the point of selling your property, or indeed if it was inherited after you pass away. Now, this tax never was introduced because in 1915 the First World War broke out, obviously in 1914. In 1915 there was too much going on, and the government decided to cancel this tax because obviously they were concentrating on the war effort. But it means that we have this period in time between 1910 and 1915 where we have a nationwide survey that was taken out in 1910 and updated for those 5 years. And it doesn't just cover the property, so land, but it also covers buildings as well. So every single building and property was listed in the 1910 land survey. So it's a very thorough survey, and it's made up of IR 91, which is the initial sort of pilot survey of valuation books of London and Westminster. Then you have the IR 58 valuation books. And then we have the maps, which are in the series IR 121 all the way through to IR 135. I'll just show you an example of all these in a second. Now, this is a mammoth project. It's about 4 times the size of the 1911 census, and it's going to be a few years yet before we complete the whole country. But just to give you an idea of what's currently available on the site, we have London, Bedfordshire, Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, Hertfordshire, Oxfordshire, Middlesex, Northamptonshire, and we've just released Wiltshire as well. So we'll be covering the southwest of the country next, and moving up through the Midlands, and then moving on to the north and Wales. So jumping back to our Lloyd George Doomsday for Chessington, going back to Burnt Stubbs Farm, we'll look at the plot number now. It's now listed as Chessington Lodge, taking the original name again from way back when the original mansion was built before the Civil War. And we can see here that the owner of Chessington Lodge is the Right Honourable Arthur Fitzgerald Kinnaird. Now, he's a bit of a character. He was the director of his family bank, which later merged with other banks to become Barclays Bank, and he became the main board director of Barclays up until his death. But that's just half the story for Arthur. He was also the first major football star and is named as popularising the sport. Back in the early 1900s, there's even a TV series called The English Game, a documentary drama about him. It's on Netflix, which I really recommend you watching. He also still holds a record today for the largest number of FA Cup finals being played in. So Arthur Fitzgerald Kinnaird actually played in 9 FA Cup finals. And he was indeed the president of the Football Association for 33 years. So he was a very busy guy. But we can see here he owned Chessington Lodge, and you can see there's 4 very detailed pages just about this single property, because there's 4 pages of details for every single property in the Lloyd George Doomsday Survey, covering the owner, the occupier, the sort of insurance rates, the rentable income that you could achieve if you were to rent that property out, the dimensions of the property. You get a description of that property listing rooms, any outbuildings. You often get diagrams as well, especially if they've got outbuildings on the property, showing you how the whole layout of that property is. But the key thing here is the plot. The plot number is listed in the top left-hand corner of the page, so plot number 10. We can jump then from plot 10 to the Lloyd George Doomsday Survey maps themselves. We can zoom in and see the detail there. So you can see Chessington Lodge just in the top left-hand corner, indicated by that red pin. And there's a picture of Chessington Lodge as it looked back in the early 1900s. So we can then move further forwards in time using our census records, because we've georeferenced all of our census records on the genealogist, from 41, which has just been released, all the way up to the 1939 register. And that means you can travel through time and watch a property as it changes hands. So here we have Burnt Stubbs Farm on the map, and we can see in 1841 it was owned by James Perry, which you may remember that name. James Whitehead Perry was listed in the Tithe Records. He is still there in 1841. We can then move forwards to 1851, and we can see the occupier of the Chessington Lodge now is John Miles, who was a major landowner, and he was also a director of the New River Company, which is where London got its water from at the time, so he's a very wealthy chap. In 1861, we see it's now occupied by Thomas Stent and his family. However, you can see that Thomas Stent was listed as Chessington Lodge entrance on the map, not Chessington Lodge itself. If we bring up the image for the census records, you can see just a couple of entries down from the Chessington Lodge entrance is Chessington Lodge Estate, and you can see there by that dash and U next to it that it was actually one property that was unoccupied. So in 1861 it was unoccupied at the time. In 1871 we can see there listed as F.F. Kelly. F.F. Kelly is actually Frederick Festus Kelly, who was the founder of Kelly's Directories. So genealogists may have heard of Kelly's Directories, a very good geological resource. That's where he was living at the time of 1871. Then in 1881, Frederick Festus Kelly still owned the property, but he wasn't in the property at the time of the census. He was actually in his London property, so it was left unoccupied. In 1891, it's occupied by a William Otto Danckwerts, who was a noted lawyer of the time. In 1901, we can see there Frederick Bingley, who was a barrister. In 1911 is a David Cameron, not the former Prime Minister, but actually a director of the East India Company. And in 1939, we have R.S. Goddard, who founded Chessington Zoo, or Zoological Gardens, which then obviously later became Chessington World of Adventures. So you can literally jump onto Map Explorer, which is our tool to view maps I'll be describing in a second, and page through all of these different censuses and discover how the ownership of a property changed through time. It's a bit like going in a time machine and being able to see who was living there throughout history. So these records are all available in our tool called Map Explorer, and I'll go into a bit more detail about that in a second. But also available in Map Explorer are historic Ordnance Survey maps. We have 4 different series of Ordnance Survey maps covering 4 different periods of time. We have the 1880s, which covers 6 inch to the mile, and this is what you can see on screen, where we've got Burnt Stubbs Farm listed. We have the sort of 1920s to 40s, which is 1 inch to the mile, and you can see there Burnt Stubbs listed as Surrey Zoological Gardens as well. We then have the 1930s to 60s. That is a 2.5 inch to the mile. And you can see When 1931, with Zoological Gardens opens, and then they bring their branch line down. So the railway is built down to Chessington in 1939. And then finally we have a 1955 to 1961 range of maps as well. So you can see how an area changes over time using those. We also have a series of different modern map collections that you can look at, including OpenStreetMap, which is very good to see road names and place names. We have Ordnance Survey maps. We also have Bing maps that give you satellite imagery as well. So if we look at the historical map for Burnt Stubbs Farm, you can see it's actually now jumping to the satellite image, the site of Chessington World of Adventures. So you've heard me talk about Map Explorer. It's our tool that allows you to view all of our map collections and map-based records in one simple interface. And it means you can also jump through time using transparencies to see how an area changed. So we have sort of three layers of Map Explorer. You have the record set layer on the top. You have our historic Ordnance Survey layer in the middle, and right at the bottom, the base layer is our modern day map. So you can go from, in this case, the record set layer is Tithe. You can go through the transparency to a historic Ordnance Survey map, and then again through to the modern day and back. So you can see exactly where a particular historical building or a particular record is in today's terms as well. So Map Explorer has quite a few different options on it. So I'll go through those now. So you have a drop-down box to change your layers. You have the record set layer here, which includes what we've seen so far. So you can access the Tithe Records, the Lloyd George records, and many others too, which I'll cover in a second. You have the historical Ordnance Survey layers, the middle layer, where you can change through to see anything from the 1880s all the way up to the 1960s. And we've got the modern day layer as well. So you can see a satellite image or an OpenStreetMaps version of that modern day map. And as you can see the big expansive site of Chessington World of Adventures now. There's some other options that can help you find out more. For example, there's a search box here where you can search for a particular place or postcode even. So you can search for a modern address or an old street name, because it covers both modern and historic searching. You can jump to a particular county or parish, or even show boundaries for parishes and counties, which is very handy to see if a record is in one particular parish or another, as they change boundaries throughout time. If you're out and about, you can actually access Map Explorer on your phone, and if you're doing that, you can click Locate Me and jump straight to all the records where you're currently standing. You can also then click on the cog to download an image of that map as it looks on your screen, or print it out so you can keep it on a piece of paper and add it to your research. And when you're searching our map-based records, you'll also see this blue bar at the top of those records, which allow you to view a map of those results. So if you go into our advanced search, and then, for example, go into Lloyd George, I'm just looking for all the properties that Arthur Fitzgerald Kinnaird owned in the 1910 Lloyd George Doomsday. If you click that blue bar to view those results on a map, you can then see all those green pins indicating the properties he owned in 1910. We also have our image archive available on Map Explorer, showing you all the red pins where we have geolocated our thousands of images dating right back to the dawn of photography. We have headstones. Our National Headstone Collection is also available on Map Explorer, so you can click a particular pin and view those cemeteries' headstones. We also have war memorials available on Map Explorer, so you can see all of our nationwide war memorial collection, over 1.5 million records available there, all listed as pins on Map Explorer, so you can see exactly where it is. So I hope that's gone to show all the huge amount of map-based records and collections available on the geologist, and that one unified tool, Map Explorer, to view them all so you can travel back through time and discover more about your ancestors' lives. Well, I'm very pleased to say that as sponsor of All About That Place 2024, we've got a special discount for you where you can get our top level diamond subscription for just £95 a year. And you'll save every year your subscription renews with our lifetime discount. And we're also teamed up with Discover Your Ancestors magazine to give you 12 months of their online magazine included in that price. If you'd like to take us up on that special offer, visit thegenealogist.co.uk www.census.org/AATP24, and you'll see this link around all about that place where you can claim your offer. Well, thank you very much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I've also got a couple of other talks. So if you're interested in the various tools that you can use to break down brick walls, you can see my talk from earlier today, listed on the schedule. And if you're interested in the different records that you can use to find out more about your ancestors' lives, you can see my talk tomorrow. And in fact, if you're in the sort of London area, please do come and see us live at the Kempton Park show at the Family History Show London. To buy tickets, there's a special offer on where you can buy tickets at thefamilyhistoryshow.com, and you can get I think it's 2 tickets for £12. But that show is tomorrow at Kempton Park Racecourse, so I hope to see you there. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.